What's up, everybody? It's Dakota, and today, if you've seen any of my other spoiler videos that I've done, like I did for Theros Beyond Death, I'm just going to be going over some cards that are in the set that have either been spoiled, and then going over some that get spoiled in the future, and just kind of give my thoughts and opinions on them. The cards I think are going to see the most play in like constructed formats and things like that. And this one I find particularly interesting because as I'll explain here, like it's kind of good in all stages of the game. So, Fiend Artisan is a mythic hybrid, double hybrid green and black for a 1/1 that gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. Then you can pay X and then a green or a black hybrid, tap it to sacrifice another creature to search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle your library, activate this ability only anytime you could cast a sorcery. So, first, obviously, this card would be pretty busted if you had a essentially a better pod effect attached to this creature that you could do at instant speed. Obviously, it would cause a lot of nightmares and a lot of like synergies and things like that. That you could just they could with this card. As far as like it getting +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard, like obviously better, a little bit better than some of the other cards that have this kind of effect, since it's a static effect. Now, obviously, if your opponent eats creatures out of your graveyard, then this thing will get smaller. Uh, like the inverse too, you could just like throw creature cards in your graveyard, and this thing can get bigger. There's like combat tricks and things like that. So overall, I really like this card because it does a lot of things that you want to do with something like this. So essentially, with this card being a 2 drop, obviously it needs to do something powerful. Like we have Tarmogoyfs as like 2 mana, like 5/6s sometimes. Like we had Sylvan Advocates back in Old Standard, and this card being a 2 drop. Obviously, if you play this on turn two, it's very likely that it's probably just going to be a 1/1, maybe a 2/2. But if it comes down early, then essentially it's pretty good for like its pod type effect of just like sacrificing like maybe some mana dorks or things like that that you're playing, or some of your smaller creatures or things that you even want to die to get value from, to then just put bigger things into play and have a mana sink for like the late game. Uh, but if you play this card like pretty late, obviously like the last ability on it is still really powerful because you can go and search out big things with it. But it also gets bigger itself as like these grindy games go, and I think this is kind of a card that like mid-range decks want in the format that aren't also ramp decks. Like obviously, I think this card will slot in like some of the other ramp decks, just to find like bigger things. I mean, like dumping 8 mana into this and sacrificing like an arboreal grazer or something like that, or even like one of your other smaller creatures like a paradise druid, and then going and getting like an agent of treachery or something like that. Like that's pretty good. And you're also putting a creature card in the graveyard, which makes this thing bigger, and eventually this thing can start turning sideways with all the other creatures that it got from your library to eventually just close out the game. Which again is a lot that this card does, and a lot that some mid-range decks have been lacking. Like there's a ton of like the mid-range like ramp decks that want to play 7 drops on like turn four, or like cast Uros from the graveyard on like turn four and things like that. And this kind of gives you a different route to go, because now you can play like some smaller like value creatures and play like this incremental like value game, and then you have a card in your deck that fits in the 2 drop slot that you can play on turn two, and you can play on like turn six, and just by how games naturally play out, this thing will get bigger. And obviously, with more lands or more mana sources that you have in play, this card can just go tutor out bigger things and give you like some really good value, like ETB triggers and things like that. This being able to go grab like Uro or something is also really good because it can pump itself for the time being, give you the value of like drawing a card, gain 3 life, potentially put a land into play, and then obviously you have Uro to get back later, or you can like playing this like in a Jund style deck and going in a Croxa, which might even be more more favorable because you could play like an Arboreal Grazer or a Llanowar Elf or something like that on turn one. Play this on turn two, and then turn three you're going and getting a Croxa from your deck, pumping this thing up, and just kind of slowly getting ready for um, for playing Croxas and possibly even other like Titans and things like that that could be spoiled later in this set. On top of all the other big creatures we got, which I'm definitely going to be going over in other videos and stuff too. But really, this card just kind of does everything that you wanted it to do in like a mid-range shell. Uh, Obviously, this is pretty good at just like getting you death triggers, getting you ETB triggers for the card that you search up, and then eventually, other copies of this card can just be, 2 mana 4/4s, 2 mana 5/5s, or even like 6/6s and things like that. And they're just so big that they're just going to be really hard to deal with. Now, I think this card will definitely see play in standard. I think people like week one, or even like with the event that's going to be going on for FNM, this card is going to see play. It's going to get played. Well, actually, I guess it's not the event's not even like has Ikoria cards, but like when this card is going to see some sort of play like week one, possibly week two of standard, and I think it's going to be trying to do like over the top big things in a mid range shell that is basically either going to be Jund or Sultai because Uro and Crocs are just so powerful. And the fact that they're cheap means that this thing can get them for super cheap by sacrificing these other small creatures. And of course, as people know, like birthing pod type effects have always been powerful in standard and just any format in general. This could possibly see play in Pioneer as well. Again, like Uro and Crocs are really powerful in those formats. This just giving you like this incremental value and being able to like tutor up different ones and two drops where they're obviously a little bit more powerful and like Pioneer and Modern and things like that. To be like on a side note related to that, like I don't think this card's fast enough for Modern, at least in the state that it's in now and Legacy. I think this card's going to mainly see a lot of its play in Pioneer and Standard in the first few weeks to kind of give some more like mid range decks, possibly maybe even some like weird like creature control decks, some like versatility and things like that. But that's my evaluation. That's my thoughts on Fiend Artisan. Really good card, powerful early, mid, and late game. And again, just that last ability on its own is just what makes this card like really powerful. Again, if it was you didn't have to only activate it when you could cast sorcery, that'd be a little bit different. Then this card I think would be obviously way better. But even with like that drawback to this card, still really good, still really powerful. I would say worth picking up if you can get like a good deal on it in paper, and obviously worth spending the wild cards on arena and things like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video about Fiend Artisan. Be on the lookout for more uh, Ikoria spoiler cards and spoiler videos from me because I'm gonna be definitely hopefully doing a lot more than I did for like Theros Beyond Death because there's a lot of cards I like in this set and a lot of thoughts that I have about this set that I just want to get out and express and everything because I think from what I've seen from people they're probably not very popular but um, definitely interesting and fun for me to go through. But thank you guys for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed and be on the lookout for the next one.